The mist danced lazily among the rocky peaks of Mystic Ridge, enveloping the small aircraft in an icy embrace that made Sarah unconsciously tighten her arms around Ethan, who rested against her chest. The one-year-old baby slept peacefully, oblivious to the light turbulence rocking the plane, his dark curls bouncing gently with each movement of the aircraft. "I'm glad he's sleeping," murmured Sarah, adjusting the blue blanket covering her son. "Did you get some good photos of the mountains?" Michael, leaning over the window with his professional camera, smiled without looking away from the landscape. "Incredible, honey. The light is perfect today. These rock formations look like they were sculpted by gods." He took a few more shots, the sound of the shutter mixing with the constant hum of the engine. It was worth bringing the heavy equipment. The pilot, an experienced local man, nodded. "You picked a special day. The ridge is more beautiful than ever. We'll be at the lodge in 15 minutes. Sarah sighed, finally feeling her muscles relax. The last few months at the hospital had been intense, with shifts extending into the early morning hours and complex cases that left her emotionally drained. This weekend would be exactly what her family needed: silence, nature, and time to simply exist together. "Mom was worried about us flying with Ethan," she commented, gently caressing the baby's little face. "Grandma Rose and her intuitions." "Your mother has always been like that," Michael chuckled softly. "Remember when she insisted we not leave the house the day Ethan was born? Said the stars were singing differently." That's when the radio began to crackle. At first it seemed like common interference from the mountainous region, but gradually the noises transformed into something that made the hairs on their arms stand up. They weren't exactly voices, but distorted whispers that seemed to form words in an unknown language. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Duki. You hear that?" she asked her husband, instinctively lowering her voice. Michael frowned, pausing his photography. "Hear what?" "The radio. Those strange sounds." The pilot fiddled with the controls, trying to tune the frequency. "Must be interference from the rocks. Happens sometimes around here." But his voice carried an uncertainty that didn't go unnoticed by Sarah. The whispers intensified, and for a bizarre moment, Sarah had the impression she could almost understand. Fragments, words about wind, about horses, about marked children. Her hand instinctively flew to the necklace she wore, a small black stone inherited from her father that she rarely took off. The stone was strangely warm. Ethan opened his eyes and, instead of crying as he normally would upon waking in a strange environment, remained completely still, as if listening to something only he could hear. His dark eyes, so much like his mother's, fixed on the window with an impossible attention for a baby. "Michael," Sarah's voice came out tenser, "something isn't right." Her husband put down the camera and turned to her, finally noticing the paleness in her face. "Sarah, are you okay? You look very pale." Before she could respond, the pilot let out a low curse. "My God, but what is that?" They all turned to where he was pointing. Ahead, a denser fog than normal was forming rapidly, creating an impenetrable wall that completely blocked their vision. But it wasn't ordinary fog. It moved in a circular pattern, as if it had a life of its own, and at its center, strange lights flashed at regular intervals. "I've never seen anything like this," murmured the pilot, beginning to maneuver to avoid the formation. "I'll go around." The engine coughed once, then twice, then absolute silence. The plane now glided in deathly silence, only the sound of wind cutting across the wings. Sarah pressed Ethan against her chest, feeling her heart race. Michael instinctively held her hand, their fingers intertwining tightly. "Mayday, mayday," the pilot spoke rapidly into the radio, but only the whispers responded, now louder, clearer, like many voices singing in unison. "Tower, we have an emergency. Engine failure over the ridge." Sarah's last words before impact were, "Ethan, Mommy's here." She didn't even notice that at that moment, the stone in her necklace was glowing with its own light, pulsing in rhythm with her son's heartbeat. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us what city you're viewing us from. We continue. The silence after impact was broken only by the distant hiss of cooling metal and the dripping of fuel onto the damp earth. Sarah awoke first, a searing pain in her left shoulder stealing her breath. The first thing she searched for was her son's eyes. "Ethan!" Her voice came out hoarse, desperate. "Ethan!" The car seat was empty. Michael groaned beside her, a bloodied forehead evidencing the impact against the plane's panel. "Sarah, are you okay?" He blinked several times, trying to focus his vision. "Where's Ethan?" "He's not here." Sarah tried to move, but the twisted metal trapped her legs. "Michael, he's not here." The desperation in her voice was enough for Michael to ignore his own pain and force a way out through the wreckage. The pilot was unconscious but breathing. Around them the clearing seemed unreal, as if the forest had specifically opened up to receive their crash. "Ethan! Ethan!" Michael shouted, his voice echoing among the trees. Only the silence of the woods responded. Sarah finally managed to free herself, her hands trembling as she searched for signs of her son in the scattered debris. The blue blanket was there, intact, but there was no trace of the baby. No blood, no crying, not even the diaper he was wearing. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, scanning the area around the wreckage. "Michael, where could he be? A baby doesn't just disappear like that." That's when Michael stopped abruptly, pointing to the muddy ground near a large tree. "Sarah, come see this." Imprinted in the fresh mud were perfectly defined tracks, but they weren't human footprints. They were hoof marks, deep and recent, as if a large horse had passed through moments before. The tracks formed a path leading toward the denser woods, disappearing among ferns and exposed roots. A horse? Sarah touched one of the marks, feeling the still, soft earth. "Here, in the middle of the mountains?" Michael examined the surroundings, with a photographer's eye trained to capture details. "There are no farms nearby, Sarah. And look at this." He pointed to broken branches at a considerable height. Whatever animal passed through here was big. Very big. The distant sound of a helicopter interrupted their speculations. Rescue had arrived. Emma Woods jumped from the aircraft even before it completely touched the ground. A forest ranger for 15 years, she had seen accidents in the mountains before, but never something that provoked the strange sensation that took hold of her as she approached the wreckage. "Folks, I'm Emma, forest ranger. We're going to get you out of here," she said, quickly assessing the survivor's condition. "Is there anyone else in the aircraft?" "Our son." Sarah grabbed Emma's arm with desperate strength. "Ethan, a 1-year-old baby. He was with us, but he disappeared." Emma frowned. In 15 years of her career, she had never witnessed such a case. Babies don't disappear from plane crashes without leaving traces. "Did you look in the surrounding area?" "We only found this." Michael showed the tracks in the mud. Emma crouched to examine the marks, her expression gradually changing from professional to intrigued. She knew every animal that inhabited the region, from deer to mountain lions. But these tracks didn't belong to any local species. "This is very strange," she murmured, taking photos of the marks with her cell phone. "There haven't been wild horses in this area for more than 100 years. 100 years, repeated Sarah, still dizzy from the impact. According to historical records, the last wild herd disappeared from the region at the beginning of the last century. The old residents talk about stories, but they're just local legends. While the paramedics tended to the pilot and prepared Sarah and Michael for transport, Emma continued examining the site. There was something else about the tracks that bothered her. They were too deep even for a large animal. It was as if the horse was carrying extra weight. "Miss Emma," one of the firefighters called her, "we found something strange here." Near a moss-covered rock, there was a small human footprint impressed in the earth. Tiny, delicate, the footprint of a barefoot baby. But there were no other human footprints around, only the hoof marks that seemed to carefully skirt that specific point. "It's as if someone put the baby down on the ground for a moment," observed the firefighter. "But there are no signs of struggle, of dragging, nothing." Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. In her years of experience, she had learned that the forest keeps secrets, but she had never encountered something so incomprehensible. The horse's tracks continued into the woods, but they seemed to deliberately avoid the most difficult stretches, as if they knew a specific path. "We'll take you to the hospital," she said to Sarah and Michael. "We'll begin the search immediately." "I'll mobilize all available teams." Sarah held Emma's hand with surprising strength. "He's alive, I know he's alive, I can feel it." Her words came out with a conviction that made no logical sense, but carried a deep, primitive certainty. The helicopters moved away, carrying the survivors. Emma remained at the site for a few more minutes. Evening was falling over the ridge, and shadows began to lengthen among the trees. That's when she heard, or thought she heard, a distant sound that made her heart race. A low, almost melodic whinny echoing from the depths of the forest. At Mystic Ridge Regional Hospital, Sarah woke with a start at 3 in the morning. It hadn't been an ordinary nightmare. It was as if someone had whispered her name, calling her back to consciousness. Her hand instinctively flew to the necklace, which now seemed to pulse with its own heat. "Michael," she nudged her husband in the bed next to her. "Do you hear that?" He opened his eyes slowly, still groggy from the painkillers. "Hear what, honey?" "It's like a lullaby. Very faint." Michael forced himself to be alert, but only the constant noise of the hospital equipment reached his ears. "Sarah, you need to rest. The doctor said the trauma—" "It's not trauma." She sat up in bed, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. "It's Ethan. He's trying to tell me something." 40 miles away, in the simple house where Grandma Rose had lived, since becoming a widow, the elderly woman woke at the exact same moment. Her bare feet touched the cold floor of the small living room, guided by a restlessness she couldn't explain. There was something different in the night air, a smell of wet earth mixed with horsemane. She went to the kitchen window, the one overlooking the backyard where she grew her herbs and spices. The full moon illuminated every corner of the familiar terrain, but that's when she saw it. Circular footprints impressed in the earth of the basil bed. Footprints that weren't there when she had watered the plants at dusk. "Good heavens," she murmured, making the sign of the cross. "Ethan." Her grandson's name left her lips like a prayer. Grandma Rose knew with the certainty that only grandmothers possess that those marks were no coincidence. They were a sign, a message. That's when the whinny echoed through the yard. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. A deep, almost musical sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. Grandma Rose felt tears springing to her eyes, not from fear, but from relief. Something ancestral in her soul recognized that sound as protection, not threat. "He's safe," she whispered to the night. "My little grandson is safe." Meanwhile, in the forest, the search operation was taking shape. Emma had mobilized 2 rescue teams, but each passing hour brought more questions than answers. The horses' tracks seemed to follow trails that weren't on any official map of the region. "It's as if it knows secret shortcuts," commented Jake, an experienced firefighter accompanying Emma. "These marks follow their own logic." "Even worse," replied Emma, studying the GPS. "By our calculations, this animal would have had to pass through impossible stretches, rocks too high, rivers without bridges. It doesn't make sense." That's when William Parker arrived at the site. Tall, well-dressed even for an expedition in the woods, he introduced himself as a businessman interested in collaborating with the search. His state-of-the-art drones and thermal tracking equipment were accepted without question by the overwhelmed team. "Unfortunate situation," he said to Emma, carefully observing the preserved tracks. "A baby lost in the mountains. I'll mobilize all necessary resources." Emma thanked him, but something about Parker's excessive interest in the horse's tracks bothered her. He photographed each mark, measured depth and length, even collected samples of the impressed earth. "Mr. Parker, the focus should be finding the child," she observed, when she saw him examining in detail the broken bushes at the height that would indicate the passage of a large animal. Of course," he smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "But understand, if there's a wild animal in the region, we need to know what we're dealing with, for everyone's safety." In the early morning hours, Parker's drones captured images that left everyone intrigued. In a clearing approximately 2 miles from the crash site, there were signs that someone or something had made a recent stop. Branches arranged like an improvised shelter, circular marks in the grass suggesting something large had rested. There. Here, Emma pointed to the tablet screen. Do you see this? In the center of the clearing, near the circular marks, there was something small and colorful contrasting with the green vegetation. When the team arrived at the location, they found a small blue pacifier, the same one Ethan was using at the time of the accident. It's his, Michael confirmed over the phone when Emma described the object. Definitely Ethan's. But what most intrigued the team was the condition of the pacifier. It was clean, with no signs of having remained exposed to the elements, and even stranger, around it wildflowers seemed to have bloomed out of season, creating a small circle of vibrant colors amid the typical vegetation of the season. I've never seen anything like it, murmured Jake, photographing the site. It's as if nature is my protecting. William Parker observed everything in silence, his hands working quickly on his cell phone. He was sending the coordinates to his men, who had already positioned capture equipment on the most likely trails. He knew he was dealing with something extraordinary, and extraordinary meant valuable. Emma carefully collected the pacifier, but upon touching it, she felt something strange, a gentle warmth, as if the object had been heated by careful hands. And for an instant, very briefly, she heard what she could swear was the distant babbling of a happy baby. He's okay, she said aloud, surprising herself. I don't know how, but he's okay. The sun was rising over Mystic Ridge, painting the rocks golden when Grandma Rose called the hospital. Daughter, I need to tell you something. Grandma Rose's voice trembled on the phone. About the night Ethan was born. Sarah, still in the hospital, held the device tighter. There was something in her mother's urgency that made her heart race. Mum, what is it? Do you remember I said the stars were singing differently that night? It wasn't just an impression, Sarah. I found your great-grandmother's diary this early morning. I was looking for something to calm me down and ended up in the attic, rummaging through old trunks. Michael approached the bed, perceiving the tension in his wife's voice. His own dreams had been restless, filled with images he couldn't comprehend. Horses running under the moon, a dark-haired woman singing in an unknown language, and always, always, the serene face of his son. What diary, Mum? Grace is your father's mother. She wrote about the riders of the lunar trot, Sarah. They weren't just legends, they were real guardians, and children born on lunar eclipse nights. They were special, protected. Sarah felt the necklace warm against her skin. Mom, what are you talking about? Ethan was born on the night of the eclipse, honey. Exactly as it's written in the diary. And that necklace you wear, the black stone, it was Grace's. She said it came from a time when the riders would return. On the other end of the line, Grandma Rose was leafing through pages yellowed by time, her voice gaining strength as she read. Here it says, the children marked by the whisper of the winds will carry within themselves the bridge between two worlds. When nature calls, the ancient protectors will awaken from their centennial sleep. Michael had pulled out his sketchbook and, without consciously realizing it, began to doodle. His hands moved on their own, creating symbols he had never seen, but that seemed familiar. Interlaced circles, figures resembling stylized horses, and in the center of it all, a small child with outstretched arms. Michael, Sarah grabbed his arm. You're drawing the same symbols from my dreams. He stopped abruptly, looking at the paper as if for the first time. I don't know why I drew this. It came automatically. In the forest, Emma had discovered something that would completely change her perspective on the case. Following the tracks along an especially steep trail, she came to a rocky wall she knew well, a place where she used to bring tourists to show rock paintings of the region. But today, the paintings looked different. Where before there were only abstract figures and drawings of local animals, now she could clearly see the representation of majestic horses and women with features distinctly resembling Sarah's. The paints seemed more vivid, as if they had been recently retouched, although she knew that was impossible. "Jake," she called the firefighter, "have you been here before?" "A few times." "Why?" "These paintings Have they always been this detailed? Jake approached, studying the rocky wall. Emma, these figures here in the center, I swear I never saw them before. And look at this. He pointed to a specific section. This woman holding a baby wasn't here last week. I'm sure of it. Emma felt a chill. As a forest ranger, she knew every inch of this region. Changes in rock paintings don't happen overnight, unless they were never just paintings, she murmured. Meanwhile, William Parker was receiving reports from his men strategically positioned throughout the mountains. The thermal tracking equipment had captured 2 signatures, one large, consistent with an equine-sized animal, and one small, the size of a child. They're moving together, his assistant informed. Always together. The child seems to be mounted? Parker smiled. The capture would be easier than he had imagined. Keep your distance, I want them alive and uninjured, especially the animal. But his plans began to face unexpected obstacles. Electronic equipment failed near the thermal signatures, compasses spun without direction, and some of his men reported strange sensations, as if they were being watched by invisible eyes. Mr. Parker, one of the trackers called, voice tense, we've lost contact with the Northern Sector team. The last signals showed they were close to the targets, but then total silence. Back at the hospital, Sarah had convinced the doctors to release her early. The pain in her shoulder was bearable compared to the urgent need to be close to the search for her son. Michael, whose injuries were lighter, had already been discharged. Let's go to my mother's house first, Sarah decided. I need to see that diary. Grace's diary was a treasure of fragile paper and delicate calligraphy. The pages told stories that seemed like fairy tales, but that now gained the weight of reality. They spoke of a time when humans and special horses lived in harmony, protecting children marked by destiny. Here, Grandma Rose pointed to a specific passage. She writes about a forced separation. The riders were persecuted, hunted by men who wanted to capture them for display and commerce. They hid in the depths of the mountains, waiting for the right moment to return. Sarah read aloud. The last guardian horse disappeared, taking with it the promise of return. When a child of the lineage was born under the lunar eclipse, it would awaken to fulfill its ancestral oath. Lineage? Asked Michael. Grandma Rose showed an old photo yellowed by time. It was Grace when she was young, and the resemblance to Sarah was striking. You are direct descendants, daughter. The blood of the ancient protectors flows in your veins. At that moment, as if responding to the revelation, the phone rang. It was Emma. Sarah, I need you to come here. We found something in the rock paintings, something you need to see in person. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us what city you're viewing us from. We continue. The walk to the rock paintings was silent, each step echoing on the rocky trail like an unspoken prayer. Sarah walked in front, her necklace pulsing stronger as they approached the site. Michael followed beside her, his fingers unconsciously tapping to the rhythm of the beats he felt coming from the object around his wife's neck. Do you feel that too? Sarah asked softly. Like something's calling us, he confirmed. It's as if I've been here before, but I know that's impossible. Grandma Rose, who had insisted on accompanying them despite her age, walked with surprisingly firm steps. It's not impossible, my son. You carry memories that aren't your own. Blood memories. When they reached the rocky wall, Emma was waiting for them with an expression that mixed incredulity and reverent fear. Prepare yourselves, she said simply. What you're about to see defies any logical explanation. Sarah's first reaction was to bring her hands to her mouth, stifling a cry of recognition. The wall didn't just show figures that resembled her, the figures were her. Every feature, every detail, every gesture, captured in stone, exactly matched the women of her family through generations. My God, murmured Michael, pointing to a central figure. Sarah, are you seeing this? The painting showed a woman identical to Sarah holding a baby, both mounted on a white horse of majestic proportions. Around them, other female figures seemed to dance in a circle, all wearing necklaces with dark stones identical to the one Sarah wore. This isn't possible, she sighed, unconsciously touching the necklace. How can these paintings show me? Grandma Rose approached the wall, her trembling fingers delicately tracing the outlines of the figures. Because they're more than paintings, daughter. They're memories of the stone, living records of what was and what will be. That's when something happened that made everyone step back in alarm. As Grandma Rose touched the wall, the paintings began to glow with a soft golden light. The figures seemed to gain movement, as if they were projections from a distant time. Emma, Jake's voice trembled. Is this normal? None of this is normal, she replied, but her voice carried more fascination than fear. And perhaps that's exactly why it's true. Michael had pulled out his sketchbook again, and now his hands worked frantically, copying symbols that appeared and disappeared on the illuminated wall. I'm seeing things, he said. Entire scenes, a chase, men on horseback with weapons, and then a painful separation. The separation, confirmed Grandma Rose, still touching the stone. When the last riders hid to protect the marked children, they made an oath. Her voice was interrupted by a distant noise, the unmistakable buzzing of drones. William Parker had located the group. Sorry to interrupt this spiritual moment, he said, emerging from the trail with 3 men armed with capture equipment. But I have an interesting business proposal to make. Emma instinctively positioned herself between Parker and the family. Mr. Parker, this is a protected site. You can't bring commercial equipment here. Oh, but I can, he smiled, showing an official document. Special license for capturing animals in risk situations. The famous white horse poses a danger to tourists and local residents. What horse? Sarah feigned ignorance, though her heart was racing. Please, ma'am. My equipment clearly recorded the presence of a large equine in the vicinity, and coincidentally, always accompanied by a thermal signature the size of a child. Michael stepped forward, instinctively protecting his wife. You're after our son. I'm after a unique scientific phenomenon, Parker corrected. An animal that, according to historical records, shouldn't exist, and a child who, apparently, has developed an extraordinary bond with it. Imagine the research possibilities, the advances we could achieve. Over my dead body, Grandma Rose approached Parker with a determination that surprised everyone. My grandson is not a laboratory guinea pig. Nobody mentioned a laboratory, he laughed. I'm talking about a luxury, ecological sanctuary, where tourists could witness this unique bond between human and animal. The financial return would be... His words were cut off by a sound that made everyone turn to the rocky wall. The paintings now glowed intensely, and new drawings appeared in real time. Figures of armed men being pursued by shadows, images of horses running in flight, and at the center of it all a symbol that pulsed like a heart, a circle with 3 rays, exactly like what Michael had unconsciously drawn. What the hell? One of Parker's men backed away, frightened. That's when they heard it. Distant but unmistakable, the whinny that Emma had heard before but now accompanied by something new, the happy babbling of a baby. Ethan! Sarah shouted, her voice echoing through the mountains. In response, the whinny sounded again, closer this time. And with it, something that brought tears to the eyes of all present. The crystalline laughter of a happy and safe child. They're coming, whispered Grandma Rose, her eyes shining with tears of relief. The rider is bringing our boy back. Parker signaled for his men to prepare the capture equipment. Perfect. They couldn't have chosen a better moment. But as the sounds approached, something strange began to happen. The electronic equipment began to fail, compasses spun without direction, and a dense mist began to form around the group, seemingly coming from nowhere. Mr. Parker, one of his men called nervously, the equipment is going crazy. It's like there's a massive magnetic interference. He didn't finish the sentence. From the middle of the mist, silhouettes began to emerge, not just one, but several. Horses and riders, like shadows of history returning to settle pending accounts. The mist thickened until it was impossible to see beyond a few yards. Within it, the silhouettes became more defined, riders mounted on spectral horses, their forms translucent, but undeniably present. They were the ancient guardians awakened by the threat looming over a child of their lineage. "This can't be happening," muttered one of Parker's men, his capture equipment trembling in his hands. "Very convincing. Special effects." Parker tried to maintain his composure, but his voice betrayed growing nervousness. "Light tricks, some kind of projection." "These aren't tricks," said Grandma Rose with impressive calm. "They are our ancestors, and they aren't happy with your presence here." The spectral riders began to move in a circle around the group, their mounts producing a sound that was both a whinny and an ancestral song. Emma held her flashlight firmly, though the light seemed to be absorbed by the supernatural mist. "Jake, are you seeing this?" she asked the firefighter. "Seeing and not believing," he responded, his voice coming out in a whisper. "But they don't seem threatening. It's as if they're protecting us." That's when the mist parted like a curtain, revealing what everyone hoped and feared to see. In the center of the clearing formed by the spectral riders, a white horse of indescribable beauty advanced slowly. Its coat gleamed with its own light, its eyes were as deep as midnight lakes, and its presence emanated a wisdom that transcended time. And on its back, safe and smiling, was Ethan. "My son!" Sarah stepped forward, but was gently stopped by one of the spectral figures, a mounted woman who raised her hand in a sign of patience. The baby seemed to have grown and matured in the days he had been missing. His eyes shone with an awareness that wasn't normal for his age, and when he saw his parents, he stretched out his little arms with a radiant smile. "Mommy, Daddy," were the first complete words that Ethan pronounced, leaving everyone speechless. The white horse approached cautiously, its eyes fixed on Sarah. There was mutual recognition there, something that went beyond logic, a connection that had existed for generations. When the animal finally stopped before her, it gracefully lowered its head in a sign of respect. "I remember you," whispered Sarah, extending her hand to touch the velvety muzzle. "Or rather, I remember us remembering." The horse allowed the touch, and in the moment Sarah's skin touched its own, a wave of ancestral memories swept through her mind. She saw generations of women from her family riding alongside that same guardian, protecting special children, maintaining the balance between the human world and the spiritual. "Amazing," murmured Michael, his fingers working furiously in the gear. Sketchbook, capturing every detail of the supernatural scene. "He's been protecting Ethan all this time." "More than that," said Grandma Rose, approaching slowly. "He was preparing our boy. Look at him. Ethan isn't just safe, he's transformed." It was true. The baby demonstrated coordination and awareness impossible for his age. He held firmly to the horse's mane, communicated through looks and gestures with the animal, and when he looked at the family, his eyes contained a depth that spoke of extraordinary experiences. "Very touching," Parker's cold voice cut through. "The moment. But you still don't understand. This animal is worth millions, and this child, imagine what scientists would pay to study this connection." He signaled to his men, who hesitantly raised their capture equipment. But before they could act, the spectral riders reacted. A strong wind rose from nowhere, knocking down two of the men. Electronic equipment failed completely, and the mist thickened again. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," said Emma, positioning herself between Parker and the family. "This is sacred, historical, far beyond commercial value." "Everything has a price," Parker insisted, pulling a high-potency tranquilizer from his backpack, especially unique phenomena. But when he approached with the weapon, the white horse reacted in a surprising way. Instead of fleeing or attacking, it simply looked directly into Parker's eyes. And in that gaze, the businessman saw something that made him instinctively step back. He saw his own greed reflected and multiplied, saw the consequences of his actions extending through generations, saw the emptiness in his heart being exposed like an open wound. The horse wasn't just looking at him, it was reading his soul. "No," Parker murmured, the weapon trembling in his hands. "It's not possible." The white horse came closer, and with each step, Parker saw more clearly who he really was. He saw the children his companies had displaced, the habitats he had destroyed, the families he had separated in the name of profit, and he also saw a different possibility, a path where his wealth could protect instead of exploit. He let the weapon fall, tears beginning to run down his face. I didn't want to. I didn't realize. Sarah observed Parker's transformation with growing compassion. He's showing you who you really can be, she said gently. The horse doesn't judge. He reveals. Ethan, as if perfectly understanding the situation, extended his small hands toward Parker. There was no fear in his eyes, only a purity that touched something deep in the businessman's heart. Please, Parker whispered, falling to his knees. Forgive me, I want to do the right thing. I want to protect, not exploit. The spectral riders began to slowly fade away, their mission accomplished. The threat had been neutralized not by force, but by the revelation of truth. The white horse approached Sarah, lowering itself so she could take Ethan in her arms. The moment of reunion was indescribable. Mother and son embraced as if they were two parts of a soul finally reuniting, while the horse observed with evident satisfaction in its deep eyes. With Ethan safe in her arms, Sarah felt the world finally returning to its axis. But there was something different about her son, an awareness in his eyes that spoke of impossible journeys and wisdom acquired beyond his years. When she kissed him on the forehead, the baby whispered something that made her heart stop. Horse. Friend protected Ethan. Now Ethan protects Horse. Michael approached, his hands trembling as he gently touched his son's face. My God, Sarah, he's talking as if he's lived much more than a few days, she completed, amazed and frightened. At the same time, the white horse remained close, its eyes never leaving the reunited family. There was something solemn in its posture, as if it knew the time had come for an important decision. Grandma Rose approached the majestic animal, her wrinkled hands extended in reverence. You fulfilled your promise, didn't you? Protected our boy, as you promised so long ago. To everyone's amazement, the horse inclined its head in clear confirmation. It was impossible to deny its intelligence, its almost human consciousness. William Parker, still on his knees and visibly transformed by the encounter with his own truth, raised his tear-soaked eyes. I have resources, he said in a choked voice. Extensive properties, natural reserves. I can create a real sanctuary. Not for exploitation, but for genuine protection. Emma observed him with skepticism. And how do we know this isn't just another of your business strategies? Because he's not the same man anymore, Sarah said surprisingly. The horse showed him who he truly can be, and that transformation, it's real. The horse approached Parker, who remained still, respectful. When the velvety muzzle gently touched his forehead, Parker closed his eyes and a visible peace spread across his features. I see now, he murmured. I see what my true purpose is. I don't possess wealth to accumulate, but to protect, to preserve what is sacred. Ethan began to stir in his mother's arms, extending his little hands toward the horse. Want to stay with friend, he said with impressive clarity. Ethan, you need to stay with us, Sarah said gently, though her heart broke seeing the obvious bond between her son and the guardian. It was Grandma Rose who offered the solution, her voice carrying ancestral wisdom. It's not a separation, daughter. It's the beginning of a new era. The ancient pact is being renewed. She turned to the group, her eyes shining with a determination that surprised everyone. The family is going back home to Mystic Ridge. We'll live in the mountains where we belong, and the rider, he'll stay close, protecting not just Ethan, but all the special children born under lunar eclipses. Michael swallowed hard. Leave. Denver, our careers. What career is worth more than your son's destiny? Asked Grandma Rose. Besides, the mountains need a pediatrician, and the landscapes here. A sensitive photographer would find work for a lifetime. Emma stepped forward, her voice taking on an official tone. As a forest ranger, I can ensure we would have all the official support to create a special reserve, especially with Mr. Parker's funding. It's not funding, Parker corrected, standing up with new dignity. It's restitution. It's reparation for a lifetime of selfishness. He looked directly at Sarah. I want to donate half of my properties to create the largest preservation sanctuary in America. And I want your family to be the official administrators. This is madness, murmured Michael, but his voice carried more admiration than objection. The white horse moved back a few steps, and to everyone's surprise, began to glow again. But this time its light extended beyond itself, touching each person present. And in that light, everyone saw the same vision. They saw Mystic Ridge transformed into a refuge where special children would grow up protected, where the connection between humans and nature would be preserved. They saw Ethan growing not just as a normal child, but as a guardian of the new generation, teaching other children to communicate with animals and plants. They saw Sarah practicing medicine in a deeper way, healing not just bodies, but wounded souls through connection with nature. They saw Michael documenting wonders that the scientific world was just beginning to understand. They saw Parker using his wealth to create a network of sanctuaries across the country, protecting not just the white horse, but rediscovered guardians, who would awaken in other regions. And they saw Grandma Rose as the matriarch of a community that would preserve ancient wisdoms while embracing an extraordinary future. Is this what will happen if we stay? Asked Sarah, still captivated by the vision. The horse inclined its head in confirmation, and Ethan clapped his little hands, as if enthusiastically approving the future he had seen. Then it's not really a choice, is it? Smiled Michael. It's her destiny. It always was, confirmed Grandma Rose. We just needed to be ready to accept it. As the sun began to set over the sacred rocks of Mystic Ridge, the last vestiges of the spectral riders vanished, but not without nodding in approval. The ancestral circle was closing, but also opening for a new chapter. The white horse approached Ethan one last time, gently touching the baby's forehead with its muzzle. In that touch, a final revelation was completed. Ethan would not just be protected by the Guardian, he would become the next link in the chain responsible for awakening other Guardians when the time came. "Welcome to your true home," whispered Sarah, looking at the mountains that stretched around them like protective arms. 6 months later, Mystic Ridge had transformed in ways few could have imagined. The ancient mystical town now housed the ancestral Guardian Sanctuary, a preservation complex that attracted not tourists seeking sensationalism, but serious researchers and families with special children from across the country. Sarah walked in the morning beside the white horse, now responding to the name Luminary, chosen by Ethan, while her son played between the majestic animal's legs with the confidence of someone who had grown up alongside an older brother. "Mom, Luminary says special visitors are coming today," announced Ethan, his 2 years of age, appearing much more in wisdom and articulation. "Is that so?" smiled Sarah, now accustomed to the telepathic communications between her son and the Guardian. "And who might these visitors be?" Before Ethan could answer, Michael came running, his camera bouncing around his neck. "Sarah, you won't believe what I just photographed on the North Trail." In recent months, Michael's work had gained international recognition. His photographs of the connection between Ethan and the animals of the ridge were being published in renowned scientific journals, always accompanied by articles attempting to explain the inexplicable. "Another animal behaving strangely around Ethan?" she asked, accustomed to the daily reports. "No," Michael's eyes sparkled. "Another horse, white like Luminary, but smaller. And it wasn't alone, Sarah. There was a girl with it, about 5 years old, whose parents reported her missing yesterday in Pine Valley." Sarah felt the familiar tightening in her chest, not anxiety but recognition. "Another chosen child," she murmured. Luminary whinnied softly, confirming what everyone already knew. The awakening had not been limited to a single guardian. Throughout the country, similar reports began to emerge, children briefly disappearing, only to return accompanied by extraordinary animals, always in moments of danger or special need. "Emma already went to get them," continued Michael, "and William sent word that 2 families are arriving today, one from Montana, another from Oregon, both with children born during eclipses who have started to show abilities." William Parker's transformation had perhaps been the greatest miracle of all. The businessman had not only donated his properties for the creation of the Sanctuary Network, but had moved to a small house in the mountains, dedicating his life to coordinating the protection of special children and their guardians. "Dad!" "Mom?" Ethan ran toward them, followed by a silver fox that had appeared in the region the previous week, and refused to leave the boy alone. "Grandma Rose says it's time." "Time for what, sweetheart?" asked Sarah, though her heart already knew the answer. "For the big revelation," announced the boy with impressive seriousness for his age. "Luminary says it's time for you to know everything." They headed to what had become known as the Sacred Circle, the area where the rock paintings now permanently glowed, serving as a kind of living library of ancestral history. Grandma Rose was waiting for them there, but she wasn't alone. Around her, translucent figures of men and women from different eras gradually materialized. They were the ancient guardians, but now appearing not as spectral riders, but as ordinary people who had been chosen throughout the centuries to protect the connection between worlds. "The time has come for you to fully understand," said Grandma Rose, her voice echoing with ancestral authority. "What happened with Ethan was not an accident. It was the beginning of a new cycle." One of the spectral figures approached, a woman whom Sarah immediately recognized as her great-grandmother Grace. "For centuries, we maintained the balance, in secret," said the apparition. "But times have changed. Humanity has reached a point where it needs to rediscover its connection with nature, or it will perish." "Children like Ethan are the bridge," continued another figure. "They were born with the ability to naturally communicate with all forms of life, and the Guardians awakened to protect them and teach them." Michael firmly held Sarah's hand as they absorbed the magnitude of the revelation. "How many children?" he asked. "For now, 12 in America," replied Grace, "but more will be born with each lunar eclipse. And in other countries, other Guardians are awakening. It's a global movement, my son." Ethan approached Luminary, and the two seemed to silently communicate for a moment. Then the boy turned to his parents with a serious expression that defied his tender age. "Ethan has to teach other children," he said, "and Mom has to take care of families who are scared when children start talking to animals." Sarah laughed through tears she didn't know when had begun to fall. "That's what we'll do, love. That's exactly what we'll do." "And I'll document everything," added Michael, finally understanding the magnitude of his role. "So the world understands that it's not magic, it's evolution." William Parker arrived at the circle at that moment, accompanied by Emma and the two families who had just arrived. The parents looked around with a mixture of fear and hope that Sarah recognized perfectly. It was the same look she herself had had months ago. "Welcome to your true home," she said, extending her hands to receive the newcomers. "I know exactly how you feel." One of the mothers, holding a 4-year-old girl who constantly whispered to a white rabbit in her arms, began to cry. "I thought my daughter was going crazy," she sobbed. "She's evolving," Grandma Rose gently corrected. "And you were chosen to help her on this journey." As the sun set over Mystic Ridge, the ancestral figures began to fade, but not before a final revelation. Grace approached Sarah one last time. "The necklace you wear," she said, pointing to the black stone that had never left Sarah's neck. "It's not just an inheritance, it's a communicator. When other families need help, when other children are lost or afraid, the stone will guide them to you." "And if we're not up to the task?" asked Sarah, the responsibility of the moment weighing on her shoulders. "You will be," smiled Grace, her form becoming increasingly translucent, "because you're not alone. You never were." That night, as Ethan slept peacefully in his bed, nestled against Luminary, who had made the boy's room his official home, Sarah and Michael sat on the porch contemplating the stars. "Do you regret it?" Michael asked softly. "The life we left behind?" She reflected for a moment. "Never. I only wonder how we managed to live so long without knowing who we really were." "And now we know?" Sarah smiled, touching the necklace that pulsed gently against her skin. "Now we know that we are exactly where we need to be, doing exactly what we were born to do." The next morning they woke to find Ethan playing in the garden, surrounded not just by Luminary and the silver fox, but by an entire family of deer that had descended from the forest to greet the newly arrived children. "The world is changing," murmured Michael, capturing the moment with his camera. "No," Sarah corrected, watching her son teach his new little friend to communicate with the animals. "The world is remembering how it always should have been." And in Mystic Ridge, where the rocks guard ancient secrets and the forest watches in protective silence, a new era was beginning to flourish. An era where special children would grow up protected, where the connection between humans and nature would be celebrated, and where ancient promises would finally find their fulfillment.